Hi, this is Joe again with another review. And for this video, we'll continue discussing the Superman movie series, or specifically the Christopher Reeve films. In the previous video, I discussed Superman, the original Superman movie, Superman the movie. It came out in 1978. Now I'm going to be discussing the first sequel, which was aptly titled Superman 2, which came out in 1980. I always thought it was came out in 1981, but it came out in 1980. And of course, it came almost exactly the same cast as it was in the original film. The only difference is that the villains, even though you had Gene Hackman returning as Lex Luthor in this film, but you also had three super villains. And that's Lex Luthor. I'm not saying Lex Luthor wasn't a super villain, he was. And the most famous villain in the Superman comics. But you also had three, superpowered super villains, which is the first and only time in these movies you have was General Zod, played by Terrence Stamp, which reprises his role from the first movie. So is Sarah Douglas as Ursa, and Dan Halloran as Nan, who never spoke a word in this movie because he's supposed to be a brainless brute of a guy. Of course, he was the tallest one of the three, and he always just go, he was grunt and everything. Of course, this movie was controversial in a way because Richard Donner, who directed the original movie, directed 80% of Superman 2. Because these Superman the movie and Superman 2 they were filmed back to back. But about 80% of this film was directed, and then they said by Richard Lester, they said, let's finish up the first one first, and then go back and film whatever scenes that were left out, or to tighten up the storyline for the second one. And they're fine. So like I said in my review for Superman the movie, you had the ending for Superman 2 was used in Superman 1. And that's with Superman running around the world, as I say, going back in time, traveling back around the Earth faster than the speed of light, and goes back in time just before Lois went into that little fault line during the earthquake. The ground opened up and she went in with the car and she dies. So Superman went back in time just before that moment happens to save Lois's life, to make sure Lois doesn't die. So that was the ending that was used in Superman 1. And that was supposed to be in the second film. So of course that was taken out. Plus, only 20% wasn't shot for Superman 2, including the reveal of Lois Lane figuring out that Clark Kent was Superman, which we're going to get into hopefully later on. Of course, so like I said, Richard Donner got into an argument with the Soulkinds. So he got fired, and they hired Richard Lester, who was more for comedy, into this film. And what happened was, for a director to get credit for a movie, he had to shoot at least 50%, just over 50% of the film. So Richard Lester reshot a lot. He did use a lot of the footage that Richard Donner shot. Plus, he added some scenes of his own. So Richard Lester would get credit as directing the movie. And of course, now into the plot. I know I went to a long opening here for almost 4 minutes already in this opening, but I have to explain a lot of this stuff before I get into the backstory, before I get into the main plot of the film. Of course, this movie, deals with the three criminals of Krypton: General Zod, Nan, and Ursa. And they did show, and one thing they did like about this movie, and they did it for the Spider-Man films, at least the first two Spider-Man films, with Sam Raimi directing, plus of course obviously all the Rocky films, they showed what happened in the movie before. Which is good, because now, of course, obviously not everybody saw the first movie, and those who did will give you a reminder of what happened in the previous film. So, this is a good technique to have, because sequels don't normally do, and only James Bond movies don't do that. There's no real continuity in James Bond films. But I'm glad they did it in this film. And that they show what happened in the film before. So it reminds people what happened. And of course, they show the three villains getting captured, getting sentenced into the Phantom Zone, and they use a different voice for Jor-El. Which they should also mention that because Richard Donner got fired from finishing Superman 2, Marlon Brando got so mad because he liked Richard Donner as a director, so he told him don't use my banned them from using his footage of him in Superman 2. Told him don't use my footage. Put a court order telling him don't use my footage. So they had to bring in Savannah York, who was in the original movie, playing Superman's mom in the original film, to fill in the scenes, the plot scenes when Superman was in the Fortress of Solitude, saying that he wants to be with Lois, and he loves Lois and stuff, and gave up his powers, which was happens later on in the film. So now I lost my train of thought now. So naturally it was cool to see all that stuff, and of course you didn't see the Marlon Brando stuff in the beginning of this movie either. You didn't see any of that stuff. You saw Savannah York, but no Marlon Brando. You just maybe saw his hand putting the crystals into the little spaceship he built for Kal-El. That's all you saw. You just see his hand grabbing the crystals and putting in the spaceship. So anyway, like I said, it takes place 2 years later after the original film, and Clark comes into work at the Daily Planet, and Perry White, once again played Jackie Cooper, tells him that Lois is in Paris covering the terrorist story. And Clark didn't know that it was the terrorists took over the Eiffel Tower and they had the hydrogen bomb. So Clark goes down the alley and he runs and he automatically turns into the Superman costume and flies all the way to Paris in super speeds. Flies over to Paris. Meanwhile, Lois is there and she sneaks into the Eiffel Tower with the terrorists there, climbs all the way up to where the terrorists are at, and she's underneath hanging on the elevator, in the Eiffel Tower, and they had the bomb in the elevator, and the bomb goes, and there was one of the terrorists who's setting up the bomb with the timer on, and of course the timer goes off. And here comes the elevator, goes streaking down, because the French guys cut the wire so you get the high. Excuse me. So the French police you get the hydrogen bomb. But once they did that, the hydrogen bomb went. The timer stored. So Superman comes just in the nick of time to save Lois and stop the elevator. Of course, he comes over that line. I believe this is your floor. And it sees Lois, and Lois says, hey, there's a bomb up there. So he flies the elevator out of the Eiffel Tower, and crashes through the top of it, goes into outer space, and throws the elevator. And of course, the bomb explodes in outer space. Of course, the problem with this was that, and it doesn't explain later on in the film, why the three villains escaped from the Phantom Zone. And that is because if there was a nuclear explosion in space, the shockwave would break open the Phantom Zone, and whoever's in there could break out. Which is what happens. And because of that plot point, now the three villains are coming to Earth, and of course eventually take over. But it's a pretty long process before they get there. And while they're getting there, first they took over, attacked astronauts on the moon. Which was a pretty dramatic thing. Of course, there's one plot point, which is how could they be breathing on the moon? They could. People could argue that plot point, but I'm surprised nobody complains over that. That how come they were on the moon and they were able to breathe? Or I guess maybe because the atmosphere won't affect them in outer space. I mean, it doesn't affect Superman in 2 movies. It's not going to affect these guys. And they try, and of course, Ursa tries to figure out what's happening. And Dan Lazar explains, I believe it's because we were in the atmosphere of a yellow sun, it gives us powers. That must be the reason. So they come from there, a place called Houston, because the guy was calling Houston, Houston, Texas, the Space Center in Houston, and Johnson Space Center there, and says, calling Houston, we're in trouble, as the three villains killed all three of the astronauts that were up there, which was a pretty dramatic, sequence, a pretty good sequence to see in there in this film, and it does come pretty early on in the film. So the three villains go to Earth and they take over this town called East Houston, Idaho. I'm not kidding. And you had not Clifton James, because I think it was Clifton James as the chef. He plays almost the same character that he played in 2 James Bond movies. I guess because his performance in those 2 Bond films in the 70s, Never Let Die, and I think he played in another film. I forgot the name of the other film. I know I reviewed them all. I think Man in the Golden Gun, I think, was the other one. And he plays the same character in this film, as confronts the 3 guys as the sheriff of this town, and he pretty much, he doesn't kill them, even though they should. General Zod and others don't kill these guys, but they roughed them up a little bit. And I wish they killed, the General Zod killed these 3 guys, the sheriff, so they won't make another cameo appearance in another movie. But all joking aside, as General Zod is attacking this town, Superman, Clark, and Lois went to Niagara Falls. Now, there's a bit of a side for me for Niagara Falls comes in, because about a year later, I actually went to Niagara Falls with my family, and we were in the exact same area as Clark Kent and Lois Lane. We walked around the same area. I am not joking. And of course, this one infamous scene where the little boy is hanging on the railing. He falls off, falls down the falls. I mean, how long does it take for him to fall into Niagara Falls? I mean, that was like, to me, it was like falling for like about 5 minutes. And then of course, Clark Kent changes to Superman and flies down there and saves the kid. And you see the Maine and Mist boat, which is an actual boat ride you could take at Niagara. And I guess it's still in existence today, where you could take it and the Maine and Mist rides in as close as you could possibly get to the falls without even the falls seeing the boat. And it was pretty close, pretty dramatic, and it was on there, and you see the floor as close as you get hit in the face with the mist and everything else. It was really great. And of course, Lois figures out that every time Superman's around, Clark is never there. And of course, the other scene where she talks about the reveal, I think it's Superman, and she's leaning on a little model boat like this, and she goes, "Where's the hurry, Superman?" When she does that scene, I was in that boat. I have a picture of my sister and I in that boat. So it's pretty cool to see Mogul Killer leaning on that boat, and I'm actually physically sitting in that, climbed in, and I sat in that boat, and that was pretty damn cool. I mean, it was eerie to be there in the same exact spot where they had that Mogul Killer and Clark Kent were. I mean, it was too eerie. And it was pretty damn, and those were the actual rapids that were going by there as well. So it was pretty damn cool to see that. And we actually walked down that walkway, there where the rapids are, and it was, I can't believe it was in the same spot as these 2 characters when they filmed this scene. I thought it was pretty damn cool. I think I was about 10 years old at the time. It was pretty cool to see that. And to be in those boats and take pictures of those boats, and was in that boat with Mogul Killer going like this. I mean, it was really. I mean, they still have the hot for Mogul Killer at that time, because she was smoking hot back then. Now, of course, Clark denies the whole thing and saves, because Lois jumps into the rapids, and Clark goes in as himself, not as Superman, to save Lois. So then they're in the hotel room, because the reason why they were in Niagara Falls, they should mention this, because they're there to do an expose on this hotel that was ripping young people off. So that's why they were at Niagara Falls to begin with. But in Richard Donner version, which should get into, they used a screen test, and the screen test was filmed at the Daily Planet building, or the Daily News building in Manhattan. So that's what That's what they use a screen test in the Richard Donner cut, which is on DVD. So, by the use of Niagara Falls in the Richard Lester cut, or it's really say the theatrical version. This is the Richard Lester version. Anyway, they're in a hotel room, and Clark grabs Lois's hairbrush, and he trips and falls over this, bare skin rug, and his hand goes into this fireplace, and actually, of course, Lois goes, "Let me check your hands." "No, I'm alright, Lois, I'm alright." And he takes his hand, goes like this, and you see his hand is not burnt at all. He says, "You are Superman," and then, of course, Clark has to tell him that he really is Superman, and of course, Lois says, "I'm in love with you." Admits that she loves him, and he says, "Oh, no, we can't talk here because Perry's going to be calling us, telling us what's happening." And he says, I'm going to take you to my place. And they go up to the Fortress of Solitude, and he says, "This is a very special place for me." And of course, she tells him, or he tells her everything about his life. And then while this is going on, that's when the three villains that mentioned blew up the town and started slowly coming to Washington, D.C. and take over Washington, D.C. while Superman was with Lois in the Fortress of Solitude. And of course, I know I'm not mentioning the Lex Luthor thing. Also, early on in the movie, Lex Luthor breaks out of prison. And he does get out to where Superman lives in the Fortress of Solitude and finds out about the three villains. So because he had this little box that Lex created, it takes alpha waves to track Superman. It's like a radar that detects alpha waves, and Superman leaves alpha waves that when he flies up north or anywhere else. So all he had to do is track where Superman goes through this radar and see where he lives. And that's how Lex gets up to the Fortress of Solitude, and he finds out information about the three villains. So when General Zod takes over the planet, and they're in the White House, Lex Luthor comes in and tells them about Superman. And says, I know where the son of Jor-El is. Oh, he's here too? General said, "Oh, he's here too?" And said, "Yes, he is." Does he say powers like we do? I said, "Yes, he does, but you or three, and he's only one." And Renan goes, grunts. Said, "Oh, four if we count him twice." So there's a lot of that, type of humor in this movie. And then, next does him over. If we go to Metropolis, that's where he usually. That's where he usually is. So they all go to the Metropolis and break into the Daily Planet building, and before that scene, of course, happened, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Superman does decide he wants to live with Lois. So his mother is talking to his mother, with the projector. The mother says, "Well, for you, if you want to live with a human being, you have to become one. And so you have to go into this chamber that's filled with rays from Red Krypton's sun, and it will take away all your powers. But in one it cannot be redone. And once that happens, you're going to feel pain, you can get hurt, you could do this, and you won't have any protection. Be like a regular human being." So he does do that, gives him all of his powers, and then you have the sex scene with Lois and Clark naked in the bed. Whenever you don't see it, you gotta see, from Clark and Lois from here up. You don't see any boobies because PG movie and anything, but it's implied that they had sex. All right, how about especially with Lois, smoking kiss, smoking hot, and then of course they go driving through from Canada back home to Metropolis, and Clark gets beat up by this bring this asshole in his diner, and then he realized that he can't get hurt, and then it was bleeding on, and that was pretty disturbing, pretty freak kids out at that time, because they also kind of figured he's going to have that scene where he's going to have a fight with somebody and he gets beat up, and that's what happened. I mean, he didn't even fight back in Clark, which was unbelievable. They didn't hit him back, not even once. I mean that was more disturbing than anything else. They hit him back once at this jerk, but he got beat up, and then while he's trying to recover, and Clark in the fight, the waitress puts the TV on in the diner and finds out that the president's surrendering to General Zod. So Zod, and then Clark realizes what had happened with the hydrogen bomb in the beginning of the film. So he goes back. He actually does go back to the Fortress of Solitude, and you don't really see it. I think in the Richard Donner cut, you actually do see Clark getting his powers back, and he does talk to Marlon Brando, who will play Jor-El, in the Richard Donner cut, which is on DVD, because it came out like in 2006, and I never saw the Richard Donner cut, but his family decided Marlon Brando had died already, but his family gave permission to Richard Donner to use that, the footage of him, of that father, in his cut, the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. So if you want to see Marlon Brando or Superman 2, go get the Richard Donner cut. I think those scenes are on YouTube. I'm not sure, but Superman does, in the Richard Lester, or the theatrical version, I should say, or the Richard Lester version, you never saw how Superman got his powers back. You never did. All you saw was the green crystal. Because if you remember, if you think fast, when Superman gave Lois this green crystal, and so Lois puts it on the ground on the counter there, and she put her purse over the counter, and she lifts the counter, and that's the green crystal. And so Clark used that, and it gets applied in the Richard Lester version. They used the green crystal to get his powers back, but you never actually saw it. Because the next time you see Superman was when after the General Zod Ursa Anon took over the Daily Planet building, and here comes Superman flying through the air, and he's outside the window with his own friend. It's a General, which he can't step outside, and because Superman, and everyone's going, oh, Superman, and Lois, Jimmy's going, Superman. And the funniest bit of the whole movie was when Jay Hackman, next to this says, oh, Superman, thank God. He goes, then he realized what he said, and he said, get him! And he says, the General Zod, get him! And they all go flying throughout the window, and he had this pretty good balance. It was a scene that it took almost an hour and a half, or more than an hour and a half, to get to that sequence, and it was a pretty damn good sequence, a good fight scene, and that's throughout the rest of the film. It is slow paced compared to the fight scene in the Man of Steel movie, where they had the same villain, General Zod, but actually different actors, of course. But that thing is like one big fight, constant fight scene through the whole 2.5 hour movie, how long it was. This fight scene would only take place like maybe a half hour, but it took almost more than an hour and a half just to get to that sequence, and it was with the weight. That sequence was with the weight in this movie. That's what made that sequence work, and they're trying to duplicate it in the other Superman movies, but it's not as good. And it was a great fight scene. And then of course Superman, you guys actually it's 3-on-1. So Superman tries to even and flies out of Metropolis back to the Fortress of Solitude, and then it says, "Oh, I won." He fled. It says Superman fled. And of course, Jim Perry says, "I don't believe you. They fled." He's not the type of a guy. And so Lex Luthor tells him, "Hey, I know where you get him if you want to finish the fight." He says, "Oh, where?" I said, "Go. I know his address. I know where he lives." So he tells them where to go, and they go fly to the Fortress of Solitude. And Ursa takes Lois, and they take Lex to go to the Fortress of Solitude. And that's when they had the final battle up there, and and Richard Lester created all these new powers for Superman. You know, the game when they double, and it was first when Zod was going after, Nan was going after Superman, and he takes the S off his chest, in his costume, and he throws it at him like it was a net. And he goes create a power with the double and stuff, which Superman never had. And but they created that just for the movie. They say, okay, what can we do here in the fortress? I mean, we did everything in Metropolis, right, in the big fight scene. What can we do here? So, you know, that stuff. And then, of course, Superman brings up the the molecule chamber. It takes away the powers. So he tells it to Lex, and of course Lex tells them, and says, no, don't go in there, General, it's a trap. And of course Superman tries to sell it, says, you're poisoning the snake. And he was like overselling it. And of course, they do go in, they force Superman to go into the chamber. And of course, Lois is all crying, and the tears are rolling down her face because he knows what it means for being in the molecule chamber. But meanwhile, big surprise, big shock here. Superman reversed it. That's why he went up there first, to trick them, to set it up, to trick them into the molecule chamber. But Superman was protected in the molecule chamber. He was protected in there, and the lights of the red krypton rays affected Zod, Nan, and Ursa, and not him. And so General Zod thinks he's got one over on him. He says, now finally, kneel to Zod. You know, he does that the whole movie. Kneel before Zod. You know, the whole film. And then he grabs, and then he said, now take my hand and pledge eternal loyalty to Zod. You know, so he grabs his hand and he breaks his hand because he grabs his hand so tight. And every actor was funny. And then you knew they switched. Then Superman switched reversed the chamber to affect them outside, and Superman would be protected inside. And then he dumps him off the cliff and into this frozen water, and he dies. And I mean, it was not clear that he died. Did he really die, or he froze, or what? It didn't really explain that. And then Nan flies off to. He was on one side of the fortress to get to where Superman was at, and he realizes he can't fly, and he falls into the wall of the cliff and down into the water there. And then Ursa was the last one there. And so Lois turns him out and says, you know something, you're a real pain in the neck. And she punches Ursa in the jaw, and she goes flying down in there. And so now it's all over. All three of them are now dead. I mean, it was kind of like a lame death. So because these three were three great villains, and for them to die like that, I mean, you set them up for great villains and great fight scene for them to A, the powers were taken away from them, and B, for all three of them to be killed like that. I mean, Superman doesn't kill anybody. You always thought that Superman never kills anybody. But he kills all three of them were killed. He kills General Zod first, and Lois kills Ursa. I mean, with one punch, and Nan flies off. So it really was crazy. And then of course, they all go back to Metropolis. Superman, Lex, and of course Lois, Lex, and Superman. They all go back to Metropolis. Of course, Lex gets dropped off. You don't see it in the film when Lex goes back to prison, and obviously, and of course, Superman drops Lois off at the her apartment, and then the next morning, Clark talks to Lois in the office, which is really the last. Well, not really the last scene. It was the last scene with the two of them in the film. The movie goes on for another 5 minutes after that, but Clark kisses Lois and makes her forget that he's Superman, which of course is another power that was created just for the movie to make her forget that he was Superman. so which is beyond lame, beyond stupid, and beyond regrettable that they did that. It was a great movie, except for these plot points and mentioning. And then, of course, in the end of the film, Superman actually goes back to that diner to beat up the guy who beat him up earlier. So he goes back in there, and he says, and of course the stupid asshole truck driver, which is what this character was, and he says, "Come and get it for us." And of course the owner of the diner says, "Hey, it cost me a fortune to fix up this joint after you beat him up last time." And then of course Clark says the best line in the movie, "That's fine, I've never seen garbage before." And then of course they got into a fight, and then of course the truck driver tries to punch him in the stomach. Goes, "Ah, ah!" So more like that. Oh God! And then Clark picks him up, dumps him on the food, and said, "This orders to go." And he shoves him down the counter into a pinball machine, and he says tilt, and the arrow is pointing over his head. Great placement there. Pointing in his head to tilt, and Clark gives him the money and says, "Sorry for all the damage, for your place here." And says, "Oh, work it out." And everybody kind of liked that this guy got his comeuppance. But in the Richard Donner cut, they actually did put that scene in there, and they did put the ending of Superman 1 into Superman 2, from what I understand, with them reversing the world, or going back in time. And then how can the truck driver remember this guy? I guess in the Richard Donner version, the Richard Donner cut goes back in time to the point where the bomb does not explode in outer space. I guess that's what like I said, I don't know. I didn't see the Richard Donner cut. I always wanted to see that cut because I heard so much about with all the scenes about Brando. But trying to find it. Trying to find the DVD. Was it 13-year-old DVD now? Trying to find it. But it's still, even though there were problems with the Richard Lester version, I still feel this movie is just as good as the first one. Perhaps a little bit bigger because there was a better threat to Superman in this movie. But of course, I should mention that one major plot point in this movie. But of course, in the original film, Lex Luthor knew about kryptonite. He came up with that term because there was also a worthless meteorite found in this museum in Africa. So Lex Luthor, which is another scene that was not in the original movie, where Lex and his gang goes into the crew, shot into this museum, shot a security guard, and get the meteorite. The problem is that Lex knew about kryptonite. So if he really want to control these villains, why didn't he use kryptonite on General Zod, Ursa, and Nan, using it on them and kill the three of them? They're in the problem, right? Or the president knew about kryptonite, right, to control Superman. When you have a supply of kryptonite, they have various in the cartoon shows and various television shows, like in Supergirl, when they have a supply of kryptonite to control Supergirl, right, in case it gets out of hand. They could use that plot point in this movie, have a supply of kryptonite, so in case when they attack, which eventually happens in this movie, when in the hell the U.S. military used kryptonite on General Zod, Ursa, and Nan, and kill them? And if that happens in the end of the movie, they want to have the big fight with Superman. But that's my main nitpick. What happened to kryptonite? How come they don't use kryptonite on the three villains? Not only Lex, but the U.S. military. That's my main point. Is that how come there's no kryptonite in this movie? I know it's been over 3-4 minutes now for this movie, because I still like Superman 2, and still is just as good, but unfortunately it doesn't hold up for the other two films in the Christopher Reeve movie series, which I will continue reviewing them when I rewatch those other two films. So this is my review of Superman 2. Please click on the video, please subscribe to my channel, and please forward this video on your Facebook pages. You can check out all my reviews on my YouTube channel at valleyseed.com, it's OWDY, and that's seed.com. There's a whole page of my reviewer, Chris Lee Moore, and please check out all of his videos on his website. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time.